I am going to introduce our moderator today, Dr. Tahira Reed. And once she takes the floor, she's going to introduce the panelists. So Dr. Tahira Reed Smith is a professor at Penn State University in mechanical engineering and engineering design, and the associate department head for inclusive research and education. She is also a co-founder of Black in Engineering. Her research involves the quantification and integration of human-centered considerations in engineering systems and/or the design process. Her work has been funded by the National Science Foundation, Procter & Gamble, and the Air Force Office of Scientific Research. Her projects involving the intersection of diversity and mechanical engineering have been featured in National Geographic, NBC's Today Show, Essence Magazine, Reuters, and National Public Radio. Her story about her double Dutch jump rope invention is featured in 2 children's books and was on the 2017 New York State Common Core exam. Dr. Reed Smith obtained her BS and MS degrees in mechanical engineering from RPI and her PhD in design science from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and a postdoc at Iowa State University. So without further ado, we have Dr. Tahira Reed Smith. The floor is yours.
Thank you for that kind introduction. Hello, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're dialing in from. Thank you, Bree, for organizing. And so I'm going to introduce our panelists. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the panelists for taking the time, making time to be a part of this discussion. And we had a great set of interactions on Zoom and by email all over the place. So let me just go ahead and introduce. So first I have Dr. Ivy, goes by Sunny. She is an award-winning assistant professor in civil and environmental engineering at University of California, Berkeley, and she is the principal investigator of the Air Quality Modeling and Exposure Laboratory. She's an emerging leader in the areas of air quality modeling and applications and community scale air pollution exposure assessment. She earned her PhD in environmental engineering from Georgia Tech, and she was a postdoc in the Department of Physics at the University of Nevada, Reno, and was a visiting scientist at NOAA's Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory. Her research interests lie at the nexus of air pollution, science, and engineering and environmental justice, and she partners with community organizations to prevent the over-industrialization of already overburdened neighborhoods. And then we have with us today Dr. Rosie Hunter. She is a psychologist with over 15 years experience specializing in anxiety and performance under pressure in varied and challenging environments. As a psychologist in the US Army, Rosie was responsible for ensuring elite Army pilots, commanders, and soldiers could perform under pressure when it mattered most. After the Army, Rosie shifted to business consulting and founded Test Wolf to reduce test anxiety and transform adversity into mindsets and behaviors for a more confident, courageous future. Rosie received a BA in psychology from Emory University and an MS and PhD in clinical psychology from Florida State University. She was awarded the Bronze Star for her service on deployment to Afghanistan with the 101st Airborne Division Combat Aviation Brigade. Rosie is a former White House intern, a presidential leadership scholar, and a member of the American Psychological Association, the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies, and the Society for Industrial Organizational Psychology. Then we have Dr. Odeth Chadwick Jenkins, who we call Chad. He's a professor of robotics at the University of Michigan. He earned his BS in computer science and math at Alma College, MS in computer science at Georgia Tech, PhD in computer science at the University of Southern California. He previously served on the faculty of Brown University in computer science. His research addresses problems in interactive robotics and human-robot interaction, primarily focused on mobile manipulation, robot perception, and robot learning from demonstration. His research often intersects topics in computer vision, machine learning, and computer animation. Professor Jenkins has been recognized as a Sloan Research Fellow and is a recipient of the Presidential Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers. His work has also been supported by Young Investigator Awards from the Office of Naval Research, the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, and the National Science Foundation. Professor Jenkins is currently serving as Editor-in-Chief for the ACM Transactions on Human-Robot Interaction. He is a Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science and Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence, and a senior member of the Association for Computing Machinery and the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. He's an alumnus of the Defense Science Study Group. We have with us today Dr. Shawnee Patrick. She is a legacy postdoctoral scholar in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at Ohio State. She received a Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Engineering at Texas A&M University. She later went on to receive a Master of Science degree and PhD also at Texas A&M University in Mechanical Engineering. Her doctoral work focused on the design methods and analysis of walking assistive devices. More specifically, she's interested in creating uniform methods utilizing biomechanics to create optimal walking assistive devices for multiple population groups. Her research interests include biomechanics of human motion, rehabilitation, design of mobility assistive devices, and engineering education. She has a passion for teaching and engineering education. Shawnee has been published in several research journals and has been rewarded for her teaching efforts. We have Vanessa Kortang. She is a doctoral candidate and NSF Graduate Research Fellow in the School of Mechanical Engineering at Purdue. She was the president of the Black Graduate Students Association from 2020 to 22, and her research focuses on game theoretic modeling to incentivize energy conserving behaviors in smart and connected communities. We also have with us Julie Mango, also Juliet Angelique Bodley. She is an actress, structural engineer, certified life coach, mental health advocate, and singer and songwriter. Julie's academic qualifications comprise John Maxwell certification and license as a certified life coach teacher, trainer, and speaker. She has a Bachelor of Engineering in Structural Engineering, a Master of Science in Engineering Management, Toastmaster Competent Communicator. With years of successful coaching experience and coaching certifications against a background in structural engineering and military training, she specializes in healing from suicidal tendencies, relationship coaching, self-reformation and reinvention, healing from self-mutilation and self-harm practices, and family and group coaching. Julie professes Jesus Christ as her personal savior, Lord and Savior, and is a mixture of sugar and spice and everything Christ. And last but not least, we have with us Anitra Rice. She is the mother of 3 amazing sons, Josiah, Jaden, and Nicholas. She lost Josiah and Jaden to depression by way of suicide in 2019 and 2021. With her greatest pain comes her greatest joy, being an advocate for the destigmatization of mental health in the Black community. Anitra is very passionate in her work as a licensed marriage and family therapist, educator, and mindfulness practitioner. Anitra began her nonprofit, the FOL Foundation, in honor of her sons. She also runs a small private practice while teaching parent workshops and working as a therapist in Detroit Public Schools Community District. But her greatest passion is raising her youngest and Earthside son, Nicholas. That was a mouthful. As you can hear, the panel is very diverse and rich in terms of experiences, knowledge, and insights. And I believe that we will learn a lot today. So thank you all panelists for being here, and thank you for everyone that signed up to be here. But before we get into the panel, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the 2 PhD chemistry students that passed away by suicide. Their passing is what motivated and moved myself, the co-founders of Black in Engineering. We were just chatting and like, what's going on? What can we do? How can we learn? And so let's just take a moment to acknowledge them, a moment of silence to acknowledge them. Okay, thank you, everybody. All right, I'd like to open up this panel by first asking all the panelists, when you received the invitation to be on this panel, what made you say, yes, I'd like to be on this panel? In no particular order, anyone can go first. And by the way, I want to establish this as a space where people can talk freely, where people can express themselves. We don't care about perfection. Try your best. Even the audience, frame your questions, try your best. Trying to make this a no judgment zone as much as possible, because this space is very sensitive and it's delicate until we want to really learn. So, okay, back to the panel. Why did you sign it? Why did you say you want to be part of this panel? Go ahead, Julie.
I accepted because I was like, yay, chance to meet new people. And another opportunity to run my mouth about the importance of mental health, and another opportunity to be very loud and make everybody uncomfortable about the possibility of suicide, the severity of self-cutting, the severity of self-mutilating. Any chance I get to run my mouth about mental health to make it less stigmatized, I jump on it. So hopefully, either Biden or Trump, whoever wins, call me and say, hey, Julie, why don't you talk about mental health? I'll be like, yes, sir, 3 bad wolves.
Who's next? Thank you so much, Julie.
I guess I can go next.
Okay.
Okay. I was excited about being on this panel just to share my experience as I'm getting closer to finishing grad school, and just to be encouraging to other grad students who are going through the journey that you can make it, and just provide some tips of things that have worked for me to see if it can help them.
Thank you.
I'll go next. I joined the panel because the 2 students on the slide just now, those cases hit close to home. I advise students every day, and I have dealt with the loss of students due to self-harm, and many of the students that I work with experience these challenges. So I want to be at the forefront of this issue to show them that someone that in their daily lives is in their corner and will speak out to support them along their journey.
Thank you, Sunny.
So I'll say that the primary reason I agreed is because the person that asked is someone that I know cares a lot. Her name's Katie Sheary, and she just cares. She's one of those people that cares a lot. And I will say that of all the things in my life that I've been through, grad school was rough. I see you, Vanessa, like, you know, it was really, really rough and in a lot of different ways. Like, you know, I'd almost rather go back to the war, honestly. So, it was tough. And so anytime you can sort of speak to faculty or speak to students and offer the good news of treatments that work, and try to just sort of let people know how to help other folks. And again, I think, like Julie said, to destigmatize things, it's just a gift to be able to be a part of that. So thank you. I'm also geeking out about what you guys do. I don't think I know that many engineers. So I was listening to the cool stuff that you do, and it's really interesting.
Thank you.
I decided to say yes to the panel because I'm passionate about mental health in graduate school. I think it's something that's not focused on very much, or in academia, right? It's the work is the primary thing. And I don't think that that's where our value as people lies. So I try and spread a message that is different, that is focused on our own values first. And, you know, the other things are kind of secondary. I know grad school is hard. I know academia is hard. I'm a postdoc, and even this space is hard in these transitions. So just trying to be open and honest about that, and also hear what everyone else has to say. So.
Last but not least, Dr. Jenkins.
Thank you. And the reason I said yes is because of my good colleague, Professor Reed Smith. To hear you do so much great work for the community, that when you speak, it speaks volumes. And I know how much you do I know how much I do. And that really, we have to recognize that effort. I think there are a lot of students, staff, and faculty across higher education that are struggling during, as we come out of the pandemic. And I think that ethic of care is really important for us to, it's the invisible sort of undercurrent that's in our classrooms and our research labs, that I'm glad we're being able to put a spotlight on right now. And I wish it didn't have to. I wish it didn't take these unfortunate events to bring us together.
Right, good point. And that just brings me to one of the other questions that I wanted to talk through is, what role does compassion have in the workplace? And how do we normalize slowing down and checking on people? Right. I think the polls show that most of the individuals here are faculty. And so how do we slow down? Like, how do we normalize that? Right. Especially, research intensive universities, there's just so much that there's so many demands, so much to do, so much output, so much. And so where does compassion play a role in the workplace? And I know earlier we had some thoughts from Anitra, who's trying to join while she's on her way somewhere else. So any thoughts on that? And I could share some of what she discussed. What role does compassion have in the workplace? I start out with a tough question. Go ahead.
I will just say this is the absolute wrong time to ask me, because I'm having to go through grading right now, and so but I'm trying to be compassionate in my grading while still making sure that that my students know what they need to know to succeed in the world. Taking time to not just have compassion, but to express it and tell people how much I appreciate them and how much they're valued in the community. It's hard to do because there's a lot of people that need that.
Sure. So let me just take it back a couple steps. So Dr. Hunter, you just mentioned you would rather go back to the ward and do a PhD. Okay, maybe for the audience, maybe for individuals that have not done a PhD, maybe can you express why did you say that? And maybe others can chime in. Can they relate? Is she exaggerating? And if it's that hard, is there something we need to be doing different in higher ed? I mean, this is a legit comment.
I was just regretting saying that. Thank you. You tricked me. You're like, it's a safe space. So,
sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. I think the apprenticeship model that of getting a PhD is just sort of has some kind of isolation in a way built into it, and some dependency, and the sort of, at least in clinical psychology, it's kind of open-ended, right? And the bar kind of moves around a lot. As soon as someone near you publishes some more, you can know that you're in the top 80 percentile of clinical psychology graduate students in publishing. But if you're in the 10th percentile of your program, that doesn't matter at all, right? And so the extended evaluation of it, I think it creates this sort of almost delayed adolescence, like this sort of delayed kind of sense of agency and authority, because you're just under evaluation, for a decade longer than other people, right? So, I mean, I think that it is important to have a theory of motivation as a leader, whether it's in business or it's in academia, that understands that kindness and compassion are not an added feature, right? It's a necessary part of getting the best kind of work out of folks, and helping people realize what they like to do and what they want to do. And so, I mean, I like to think of it as something that we should reward a little better. And in academia, again, there's just, the incentive structure isn't really the same in terms of what kind of emotional leader you are. But, I do think that the conversations are happening increasingly now.
Sure. And so I see Anitra, earlier today, we had a touch point with the panel, and there was some remarks that she shared sort of on this topic of compassion. It kind of ties in well with what you're saying. You know, it's where's the space to be rewarded and acknowledged and by showing sort of this compassion. Anitra, I wonder if you could chime in and talk about sort of this, how do we normalize slowing down, checking on people? I know we talked about a lot of times academia is very task focused. I mean, granted, everybody is a human and you have your variations. There are people that take the time to get to understand their students holistically, but how do we help some of the ones that are often task focused? Some of my colleagues, I know that their identities and their self-worth come from what they do, and there's sometimes it's projected onto students. So how can we address that? Okay, I see Julie wants to chime in.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, just earlier when we were during the discussion earlier, I was saying that compassion plays a vital role in this, and not just the final outcome or just bits and pieces along the way, but it helps a person during the processing of everything, the matriculation process, because it it humanizes the experience. It allows them to feel normal in the frustrations that they feel, the fears, the insecurities, and all of those things. And if there is a professor or a mentor who is helping them during this journey that can connect with them in that way and allow them to feel normal or normalize whatever emotions that they're having, they're more likely to experience successful outcomes. Studies have shown that compassion, especially self-compassion, helps to reduce suicidality. It also helps to reduce, of course, anxiety and depression. So if you have someone that you're looking up to and they're telling you that you are not an anomaly, that the things that you are experiencing in this PhD program is completely normal, it takes away the anxiety that you have. It takes away the feelings of otherness that we can have when we're going through something and we feel isolated, as if we're the only person that's going through it. And in order to do that, though, it's so important that whomever the professor or the mentor is, that they are able to connect to their humanity. We were talking earlier as well about how sometimes professors will use their power and authority as a weapon. They'll wield it in a way that makes the person, that the mentee, feel less than. And what I see when I see something like that is a person who is not in touch with their own humanity and who is at discord within themselves, a person who does not have a good relationship with themselves, a person who is clothing or covering up their own insecurities with the armor of arrogance in order not to be found out, because they feel like they are less than and that maybe they don't even deserve to be in that position. And self-compassion for themselves is important as well, for them to be able to properly mentor the mentee to a place of excellence and to a place of success. It is so vitally important, compassion is, to the entire process for the professor as well as the student.
Thank you, Anitra. I see Julie Mango's hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so how important compassion is in the workplace. I don't know if people tend to think that compassion is synonymous to lack of discipline or lack of structure. And so I just want to reiterate that it isn't that. Compassion is not continuously allowing an employee or a student to get away with timelines or to get away with subpar performance. Compassion is actually, agree with what Anitra said, is to allow persons to get in touch with their human side. So for example, compassion is something that allows you to feel like a part of a team. So say, let's choose a way out example. Someone is in your workplace is going through a divorce. Of course, naturally, it's going to affect your performance at work for some people. Do you have the facilities in place? Do you have the structure in place to ensure that the company does not suffer any lost time in terms of work? However, that employee is taken care of, meaning, do they have options at the workplace to talk to a counselor there? Do they have options to have that the companies offers health insurance? Does health insurance cover a therapist? Practically speaking, does it cover Paxil, mental health medication? We all have first aid procedures for when somebody's coughing, when somebody's choking. I know these first aid procedures from I was 3 years old. Do we have a first aid procedure for anxiety attacks or panic attacks? So compassion is not, I don't want persons to think that compassion is, oh my gosh, you're going through a hard time. All right, it's okay. Let the building fall down. No. What it is that I understand that you are going through something. Guess what? We care for you. Your identity is not wrapped up in this job. We care for you as a person. Here are some systems in place to help you feel better, and we await your return to the job, or we can adjust some timelines if you agree to still make these submissions on time, etc. It's kind of a give and take, and it's a process. Really and truly, it's a process. And so I want persons to understand that that is what compassion means. It's a process to make things, it's a symbiotic sort of arrangement between the worker and the organizations, because the organization needs to make money. The worker needs to get a salary to take care of the family. Everybody needs to be happy in the end. So yeah, I don't know how to end talking, so I'm finished.
I see Dr. Deborah Nazon's hand up in the audience.
Thank you. I also think that we need to stop thinking about compassion and empathy as soft skills. I was just reading a proposal, and they were talking about soft skills. They're life skills. And so how we frame it, I mean, words matter. When you talk about compassion and empathy as soft skills, then that doesn't matter. And I think that we do that with science and everything. We really need to watch how we say and what we say and how we present it, because it's really important. Compassion is so important because it leads to empathy, and you can really see what someone is going through. You have to see that. And so when you're talking about something that's soft, then I don't want to come off as someone who's just saying it, soft skills. And that needs to be, it really needs to be included in how people are valued, and also how they're evaluated. Because I think for me, having gone through the process at a later stage, if I had not been an administrator first on that campus and I knew exactly what I needed to do, I don't even know if I would have finished. So I just think that we really need to be very mindful about what we value. And we have to make people feel valued and know that they are valuable. And we have to meet people where they are. Everyone's not at the same point. We don't have the same backgrounds. And so you have to be able to step into that. So I just want to say that.
Thank you so much. I want to follow up on a comment that Anitra made because it caused me to think about a snippet of a workshop that my colleague did on campus yesterday. And I saw that she joined Dr. Catherine Berdanier. She was doing a workshop on sort of mentoring grad students. And I caught a small piece of it where she talked about how you have to use scaffolding. And she had this nice diagram showing a cliff, and then how you had to create these staircases to help a student get from point A to B. And I think the example she used was doing a lit review or writing an article. And she had a whole description on how to get them there, as opposed to this steep curve, the steep step from 0 to nothing, and making the staircase match where their skill levels are. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Catherine. I saw that you're here. Could you chime in on that? Because I feel like it ties into some of what Anitra was saying with sort of meeting students, normalizing things, sort of meeting students with where they're at, bringing them to where they need to be. I don't know if you could chime in. I put you on the spot.
I'm not on the panel. I'm here to learn. No, I mean, what I was presenting was Vygotsky and zone of proximal development, right? So I'm an engineer too, but I do engineering education work focused on doctoral engineering attrition. But figuring out for any given concept, right? What is that threshold? How big is that from the point of view of the student, right? What I can take in one jump now as a professional is not the same as what my students can do. And figuring out how big those steps need to be. And those steps are going to be different heights for different students for different tasks, and thinking about that individualized nature of mentoring. So that's all I'm going to say, because I really want to hear from everybody else.
Nope, thank you. Perfect. Didn't have to try to restate what you said so perfectly. So we've been talking about the environment. We've been talking about just all the different things grad students can experience. And it's not limited to grad students, faculty, staff, they have stress too. There's a whole lot. And so I actually just want to go into the topic of suicide itself. We've heard so many stories. We're here because of the PhD students. They prompted this. We heard the big one with Ellen's DJ Twitch, and everyone was so surprised. Are there warning signs that we could look out for when it comes to suicide? Is there anything, we're in these classrooms. Sometimes I see students and I can't tell if something's going on with them. Sometimes I just take them to the side, say, hey, meet me, let's just chat, and I want to catch up with you. But are there warning signs to look for individuals that might be inclined to suicide? Can anyone speak to that on the panel?
Yes, I can speak to that. Excuse me. Definitely, there are warning signs that we can look out for. If a student all of a sudden becomes withdrawn or really quiet, when that student is, usually more outspoken or gregarious, or if you just see a student who's looking sullen. Of course, just, looking sullen isn't a cause to be concerned about suicidality, but just even the compassion piece is being able to feel with others. And if noticing a student who's sullen more often than not, just pulling them aside and say, hey, how are you? How you look really sad, and just starting a conversation about that. And then if you are suspecting that this person is suicidal, just coming out and asking, have you had thoughts of harming yourself, or have you had thoughts of suicide? And I know that makes us uncomfortable to say that, but it's so important that we use that language and not just kind of dance around it. Other things could be if the person is always sleeping or really fatigued. And of course, when you're in grad school, that's it's, common. You're working some of the time, and just trying to do your regular life and then studying. And, fatigue is a part of that. But when it's abnormal for that person, or if a person is easily irritated or easily agitated, if they're fidgeting a lot, when you notice that, this wasn't necessarily this person's character, or if this person has like these angry outbursts, or just really angry, or you notice that this person is drinking more, or using other substances, or if you see that all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, when a person has been sad or sullen for an extended period of time, if suddenly they're okay, suddenly it's like, wow, you're looking pretty good today. And you're like, yeah, you check in with them. Because a lot of times when people are committed to ending their lives, they will have this sudden burst of energy when they've had the plan, and they know, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. This is when I'm going to do it, because they see an end to their pain. They see an end to the torment that they're in. And so for them, it feels like a relief. And so finally they can have some peace, because they know that in a little while it's going to be over. If a person begins to suddenly give their treasured items away, that they're asking you, hey, do you want I have this this book that I think this study guide or something that is really precious to them, and they're like giving it away. You're like, you sure you don't want this? You sure you don't need to keep this? Definitely check in with them. Check in with them to say, hey, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about not being here anymore? Ask the direct and pointed questions, but definitely there are signs that we can look for that can alert us and alarm us to people's suicidality.
Julie Mango.
Yeah. Some of the less obvious signs, and Anitra kind of touched on it at the end of what she was saying, is a person who is just extremely happy all the time. All right, take comedians, for example, and even the example with Twitch, and take Robin Williams, for example, and take me, for example. A person who under normal circumstances is always pumped up, almost like they're on a high. It is a sign of an overcompensation for something that they're going through. Not all the time, but that's one of the signs that you, as a person who, is a little bit more level-headed, you can observe it over a period of time and decide, maybe you want to ask this person, is everything okay? Because clearly they're overcompensating and like it's on a high. They're on a high. The other thing is extreme cynicism. I know personally that when I am thinking to commit suicide, or I think, you know what, I'm finally going to do it, I become very cynical. So I would say, yeah, I mean, I don't have any money in my bank account, but it's fine, right? And I would smile or something like that. Or if my mom is sick, or I have to do surgery to take my fibroids out, but hey, I'm sure I'm not. It's like an overcompensation. And another thing is like final statements. So when they say things like, such is life, or well, it is what it is. No, I understand that people always say things like that because it's a tagline. And I learned that that's a tagline when I moved to the US. Like it's a thing, well, it is what it is. But you have to observe sometimes the difference in the tone with that person. Are they saying it is what it is because they have accepted something and they still have hope, or are they saying it because they have accepted something and it looks to them like life is just hopeless? So, it is what it is, or such is life, right? Or just has to be that way. It's a sign of giving up. And like Anitra said, sometimes when they have finalized and made a decision that they are going to take their lives, these comments would have preceded that sort of, I've come to a decision. So look out for these little comments, and those are like the less obvious warning signs.
So I'll add a specific like tool. I just put in the chat. There's this. This is a free resource I think it's a collaboration from Lady Gaga's foundation, Born This Way, and a Canadian mental health organization. And I sort of, at the recommendation of one of my friends, completed this like hour-long programming. It's like, what could this be? It was really, really good. It talks about saying what you observe on any concern, right? So you don't want to just try to sort of guess, is this suicide? If not, I'm going to leave the person alone, right? That's kind of a hard thing to carry. And it talks about like having boundaries if you have a concern. And I think it's the kind of thing where you could just ask your whole department to do it, right? The professors, the students, everybody. And so then it's not you walking around thinking, oh my God, am I going to spot it when it's my student? Right? That there is a collective sort of responsibility. And this teaches people how to be polite when they have a concern. Some people are avoidant when someone looks sad. Some people are all up in their stuff in a way that makes that person like, whoa, that's a lot. But if everybody got on the same page in some way, then that can be, I think that can be really helpful. The other thing I would say, since it's mostly professors, is you all have a good sense of when there's somebody that's on the outs, right? When you see a whole bunch of people together and you just know all the grad students are really tight and suffering together, except for that one, right? And then it's, how can I do things to proactively get that person back in the group? Like, hey, let's all sit together at this table today, right? Or say to someone, hey, is anybody looking out for that person, right? Just kind of making sure your flock is taking care of each other, I think is important too. Because the actual like moment of trying to figure out when that is, base rates make that really hard, and people do actually act very differently and odd, and sometimes just like themselves and sometimes not in that moment. So I think that can be sometimes too scary of a strategy for yourself. So hopefully these tools will that be their certificate, and then just kind of thinking, what can we do to get that like wayward lamb back in the fold? Hopefully that's a little easier.
Sunny, you wanted to add. Unmute yourself. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to add very quickly about warning signs. I'm talking from personal experience. So this would have been 2018 when I started my faculty position. So warning signs. And my signs require you to have a personal relationship with the person, right? And know their background. In particular, if people or the person in question has had a series of like really traumatic events, life events, back to back to back. And so compounding stressors is a warning sign. And usually they will tell or confide in someone, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. And usually it's the next thing that's a trigger, right? The second thing that I find to be a warning sign are final preparations. So just gonna be vulnerable here. I created some trust documents. I set up legal support for a dependent member of my family when I thought it was too much. Okay, so those of us who are maybe like not students and, you know, we are very analytical and objective, we may put our things in order, or we'll talk about where to find our final documents, okay? So I think paying attention to the things that are happening peripherally to that person is important, which requires us to actually talk and have conversations with our mentees.
Thank you for sharing that. And that actually brings me to a question. I wanted to circle back to the postdoc and the grad student, and everybody, anyone on the panel, are to that point you just raised, these compounding stressors, which I think, based on just a few things that I've read, might be the case for the individuals, that the chemistry PhD students. Based on, I don't have factual documents, just looking at some of the things that maybe lab mates put on Twitter and other comments, but it sounded like compounding issues. And I've seen people go through massive stress. I've been through massive stress getting a PhD, going back to that early comment, how difficult the journey can be for some people. And so can maybe anyone on the panel share about additional examples, and so that some of us in academia, we could be rethinking what type of environments are we creating? Can you explain or share scenarios of just highly stressful journeys to the PhD that you're aware of, or maybe experience, or friends that you've had? Okay, Vanessa, please go ahead.
Especially with the compounding stress, I think probably during my second year of grad school, when I was going through my qualifying exams. For me, my grad school experience was different because I worked in industry before coming to grad school. And so at my program, in my department, definitely being the only like Black female, and then it seemed like some of my peers were not, you can see people are trying to figure out if you even know enough to stay in the program. And I got that vibe from some professors. So it's like when you're going through the qualifying exams, You want to pass because then you don't want people to be like, oh, you don't belong here, and the qualifying exams prove it. And so I remember just after I took my exams and my one of my math exams I didn't do well on, I was gonna have to retake it. And I just remember one thing that was very helpful for me during that situation was my advisor just telling me, take some time. It's okay. Like, this doesn't reflect you as a person. And when you approach your grad experience, go at a pace that's good for you. So what I learned during that experience was that I was studying how my other peers were studying, like, oh, study everything when you only need to know 6 topics. It was like, you know what, choose the 6 topics that you understand well, focus on those, and then do those ones on the exam. And when I did that, I did well and I passed. So that was one thing, was having an advisor who actually give me the permission kind of to like slow down, take a step back. And then one thing I had to do for myself was I actually decided to go see a counselor, because I felt like the compoundingness of like struggling through some of my classes, getting acclimated in my program, then my qualifying exams, I could literally see myself like break down in the future or leave my grad program. And so I ended up deciding going to counseling to help me through that situation.
Chad, you wanted to add?
How about I'll defer and I'll let our other panelists speak first.
Shawnee, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, my journey in grad school is not the easiest. I didn't necessarily have a great advisor, and I still think he had the skill set. He was going through his own things too. But I had to work through grad school, right? I've never been supported by faculty. I had a job. I had 2 jobs. At one point in time, I had 5 jobs during graduate school. And so that was difficult. And also, I have aging grandparents. I'm blessed to have all of my grandparents living, but now all of them are over 80. Losing loved ones during the pandemic, not even from like COVID, but I lost like 3 people, you know, during that like a 6-month span. And I didn't really get anyone asking like, hey, Shawnee, how's it going? Right. But instead I went ahead and I did a workshop on what I call dissertating through disaster, and like having to deal with this process and all these things. Like, life still happens in grad school and in academia. And during that time, it just made me like realize like that my worth and my value is not in this degree. You know, it's not in this. I mean, it's great, it's cool, but if I don't get it, or if it takes longer, so be it. Like, I'm not gonna die for this. You know, like that was my standpoint. Like, I could not let it take me. And so to Vanessa's like point, also getting therapy and realizing like things are impacting me, because if you're a person who's like a helper in my family, I'm a big helper, so I'm like helping and taking care of all of these things, and also working and also doing this and also doing that, but like taking the time to be like, okay, maybe I should check in with myself. I didn't do that until I'm like crying in the bed. And like, I'm like, sometimes I just like talking to my sister, like sometimes I just cry, like right now, like just random tears, you know? So taking time to check in with myself, and it kind of just took some life happening to realize that was important to do.
Chad, please go. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks everybody for sharing. I would also just add that I think we have a you know, and maybe I'm reflecting too positively on what's happened in the past, but I think we have a much more competitive academic environment right now. We treat research, it's always been publish or perish, but increasingly we're treating research as a commodity, where there's a lot of pressure to generate more first authored papers and more and have a full Google Scholar list and lots of citations, and you know, and where the rubber hits the road is when it comes down to things like postdoctoral hiring and faculty hiring and tenure and promotions. And that creates a system where if you feel like you've been left behind, it can cause some despair. And I think there are things that, you know, there's things that we can do to look at individuals and how they're responding to the situation. I do believe there are things that we have to look at in terms of the system overall, to think about what we need to do to create both innovation and understanding and scientific advancement without necessarily having people to compete against each other in such a bottom line and transactional way.
Shawana, did you put your hand back up? Shawana, did you?
I just forgot to lower it.
Oh, that's okay. You know, it's funny, qualifier exams. I'm grateful to departments, and I know Penn State is one of those, the ME department, that have said, let's take a step back and think about how to do qualifier exams. Look at the name, qualifier exams. And I'm going to tell you guys, I went through qualifier exams at Michigan. And when I say the most demoralizing experience that I had ever had in my life, demoralizing, I can still remember. I can remember it like clear as day, just going through that intense process. Here's the thing that could be problematic with traditional engineering qualifier exams. If you tell your students to take an exam in the area that you think matches the lab. So for me, I probably should have taken a qualifier in design or something like that. I was at the time, I was in a lab that was heavily focused on materials and some stuff. So I was taking exams in areas that I had no real background in, and went through them, failed. Okay. And it was just like, and twice on top of that. And it was so demoralizing. And I remember when Vanessa was going through it, I said, Vanessa was like, I love thermodynamics. I'm good at that. I was like, you need to take the thermodynamics exam at Purdue. I don't care if that's not what your research is. You need to take it. She took the thermo exam. She killed it. They talked about it. She aced it, killed it. And guess what? Her research has to do with game theory. Okay. And so we need to advise our students with some common sense. Just pass the daggone test. Do whatever you got to do. If whichever one aligns with what you probably have better background in, because it was demoralizing. And I tell you, I carried a lot of shame, a whole lot of shame with that. Lots of shame. It was the only thing that kept me afloat was I had good friends. I had Dr. Deborah Nazon on there talking to me. I had a church community. That's what I had. And I'm telling you, this stuff can take people out, especially if their identities are tied. I remember someone had to say to me, Tahira, engineering is what you do. It is not who you are. And then I had an epiphany. I didn't realize how much my identity was tied to engineering. And I just want to say this one other thing for anybody on the call right now that is struggling, that you're in a spot in life where you just feel like it's the worst, like you are at the bottom of anything. There was something a person once told me, and that was 10 years ago. And she said, Tahira, what you're going through right now, this was another piece of drama, not qualifier, something else. Okay, this is just a photograph. This is not your whole life. This is a photograph and it's going to change. And she was so right. And whatever anyone is going through right now, it is just a photograph. This is not your whole story, and you need to hang on and keep going. This is not your whole life. And so I just wanted to say that comment just while I'm on this flow here. And like Julie, I don't know what else to say right now. So Dr. Hunter, you could go next, please.
So I appreciate that. I can't really sit here under the word test over my shoulder and not really chime in. And so I'm going to talk about Test Wolf a little bit. I have a soft launch this week, so you can't buy anything. So this is why I feel like I can talk about it. But it's a way of when we talk about compounding stressors, grad school exams are a good marker, right? You got ailing parents and grandparents around those times. You've got financial challenges by definition, right? And then you have this exam that's a referendum on your life, right? And we know how to do good treatments for anxiety, right? Behavior therapy, for anxiety, cognitive restructuring, some exposure works. And people don't get that. And I was losing my mind about that for 20 years. And then TestWolf is sort of an entry to giving people what I call an amuse-bouche of CBT focused on the test that will hopefully generalize. Because you know, by virtue of the fact that they're there in front of you, it means they're struggling with some big thing in their way. Might be SAT, ACT, but I'm actually meeting with some engineering people next week to expand that. I've worked with medical residents, and you go in and you teach them how to challenge those thoughts. And I don't say, oh no, you're going to get a great score. I say, what's the worst that could happen if you totally fail this? Because that's what CBT is, right? And then systemically do that. It's also a warm handoff to interacting with a therapist, right? And so if you're willing, when your students are by definition in a crunch time, to introduce them to this idea that they might need support, you never can be sure when they'll reach back out to that person. And people might not reach, it's hard to find resources. People might not reach out if they've never met anyone, but just, oh yeah, we had lunch with that person that one day, your friendly neighborhood counselor from the graduate student, whatever center. I think that's something else that you can do that's really kind of useful. So yeah, I think there are novel ways out there that you can kind of hijack the pressure in academia and take it back to make people have more resilience and courage, and just take that experience and say, let's make this about something else.
Okay, Julie, and then we will open up the floor for questions from the audience.
Okay, just a quick addition to the comments, Tahira. I think you touched on the whole identity thing within the PhD and the compounding stressors and the PhD program. And so I'm not a PhD candidate, but I know that going through academia, why I hear a common denominator with everybody: the stress of exams, the stress of performing. Why is it that our identity is tied to academia? Why is it that sometimes our identity is tied to a PhD? Even me, no, I think I need a PhD. And trust me, because of how I stay, I'm going to get it and fall in the trap just like everybody else. But it's okay. But why do we latch our identity to our success in academia? Why do we latch our identity to, exactly, Christina. Why do we attach our identity to our jobs? Why do we attach our identity to our careers? And this is a practical question, and the answer is not necessarily an evil answer. The reason is because it gives you the assumption of power and also money, right? And authority. And these are things that we naturally crave, right? I mean, it's biblical that we should be fruitful and multiply. To be fruitful means to do something whilst you're here on earth. And so we latch our identity to the things that we do because it makes us feel validated. And I think the disconnect is that we are already validated just by existing, and everything else is just an addition to our already established validations. I think sometimes we miss the mark where that is concerned. To address, for me personally, I got a private pilot's license when I was 19 years old. You see me a fly plane now? Sorry, Patwa. Do you see me flying an aircraft? No, absolutely not. Because I didn't want to be a pilot. You know why I did it? Because of the hype that came along with it, because of the validation that came along with it, because my parents loved it. The country I grew up in the country, in the rural parts of Jamaica, and this country girl becoming a pilot at 19 years old, I was there for the hype, not for the love of it, right? And even now, when I tell people that I used to have a private pilot's license, and their reaction is, oh my gosh, you're so bright, it still validates me. And that's not healthy. You understand? So we attach our validation to the things that we do. And that's something that I think once we master to let go of that validation, I believe that the suicide rates will decrease. And that's just one aspect of it, because I am by no means trying to simplify this thing, but that's just one aspect of it. Tahira, you also touched on, if you're going through something, take a screenshot of it. It's a photo of your life. No. PDJs has this thing that as soon as you come out of one storm, you goes in back into another. You're going back into another. So for me, and trust me, when I say for me, it's because my mind has gone so far down into the hopeless depths. Like there's nothing you can tell me to give me hope. I'm okay now, but I know what it is like to just be beneath rock bottom. I'm at the water table. That's how low I am, beneath rock bottom, or was. And so when you say take a photo, I'm going to say, okay, but this is this photo. And then 5 minutes time, I'm going to have to take a next photo, and then the next one and the next one. It's just pure stress. This is the compounding thing that we talked about, right? And so I feel like persons should try to take a step back and see, why do I attach my validation to these things? And when we can validate ourselves outside of everything, even though it's important, because money is important, job, everything, just know that our validation is outside of that. Oh, and also we are at fault too, all of us, because when we hear someone has a PhD, we treat them differently. Well, I'm guilty of it, so I'm going to raise my hand. When we hear someone studied biodiversity, some word you can't pronounce, engineering on yakety smack. Oh my gosh, really? But when you talk to the person who is the cashier at Walmart, do you say, oh my gosh, really? No. So I am at fault too with persons attaching their identity to these things, because I treat people, unfortunately, according to their status and stuff like that. And that is something that I am definitely working on. And I call myself out first as the guilty one. Okay, done.
Okay, I did say open it to the audience. I'll give a few minutes for the audience, and then I'm gonna come back to some final remarks from the panel. So let me just open it up to the audience. Questions from the audience, comments. I saw some in the chat. Yeah, there's quite a few people. So I see Dr. Megan Pollock. Would you like to come off mute? And you had a few comments. Feel free to come off mute. And oh, I see a hand up here. Is it Jorge or George?
Yeah, Jorge.
Jorge, I had it right the first time. Yeah, thank you for coming. What questions do you have or comments?
Thank you. So you were previously talking about compassion, and while you were speaking about that, I thought about self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And being self-compassionate seems to be very important. I have been fortunate enough to get some data from our students. I am at the School of Engineering in Chile, and we have so the data I have collected is about I've been taking these well-being scales, in particular the affect scales that talk about positive affect and negative affect. And I've been running correlations with the self-compassion scale. And what we've seen is that the correlation between those two are very high, in particular between negative affect and self-compassion. So we've seen a correlation of 0.7. And actually, if you run a regression, you find out that 50% of the variance of the negative affect is explained by self-compassion. Mm-hmm. And that's huge. It basically, I mean, to me, or maybe I'm very ignorant on this. To me, it means that 50%, around 50% of how bad you feel depends on the types of messages you send to yourself. Mm. And so I'm wondering if anyone in the audience or the panelists have experience in anything that would provide our students with better tools regarding how they treat themselves. I'm really puzzled about this. I think it's greatly important. I've seen that so huge, and yeah. So that would be my question. Thank you.
I would love to take this question because I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I said it's all yours.
Okay. I am passionate, so passionate about self-compassion and compassion. And like I said earlier, studies have shown that self-compassion helps to significantly reduce suicidality, anxiety, depression, and going back to what was being spoke about just a moment ago about the need to identify or to take on the identity of whatever you're doing. So if you are a PhD candidate or whatever it is, right? If you're, whatever, title or claim that you're seeking, to take that on as your identity. A part of the reason for that is because we are trying by and large to outrun shame. What does shame say? I am not enough. So I have to find another identity, another way to present myself to the world so that I can feel like I'm enough, and so that others won't see that I really truly am not enough, that belief. And so self-compassion is made of 3 components, and I'm speaking to Dr. Kristen Neff's work, her and Dr. Christopher Germer. Self-compassion is comprised of 3 components. It's comprised of self-kindness, it's comprised of common humanity, and then mindfulness. Mindfulness being that we are aware in our present moment of what our emotional state is, the emotions that we're feeling at any given moment, the thoughts that we're having at any given moment, and then processing them without judgment. So not labeling them as good or bad or anything like that. And of course, shame labels them immediately and says, oh, well, because you're feeling like this must mean that you're this. And all of it goes back to you're not enough, you're not doing enough, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you're not talented enough. And then self-compassion says, wait a minute, the common humanity piece. There are other people in this program that are experiencing common things that I'm experiencing. I am not the only person who's going through this. And then the self-kindness piece comes in with how would I treat a friend who is going through the exact same thing? What would I say to this friend? And learning, honestly, to be your own best friend. To begin to say to yourself, wow, I'm hurting right now. Wow, this is really difficult for me right now. And then to say to yourself, I'm so sorry that this is so hard for you. My name is Anitra. So Anitra, I'm so sorry that this is so hard for you right now. May you find peace. May you be peaceful. May you feel loved. May you feel supported in this moment. And the power that comes with that, when we exercise those 3 components of self-compassion, of mindfulness self-compassion, the mindfulness, the self-kindness, and the common humanity, the power that comes with that is literally life-changing. And I'm saying that as I apologize. I'm saying that as a therapist, as a licensed therapist, licensed mental health therapist, but also as a double suicide loss survivor. I lost my 2 oldest sons to suicide. And the only way that I am able to stand before you right now and with peace and with compassion and calm, having yesterday been, yesterday was the anniversary of, today is Friday, so Wednesday, I'm sorry, my whole week is like kind of crazy, but Wednesday was the 2nd anniversary of my sweet beloved Jaden's departure. And that I am here right now, being able to speak these words to you in love is because I've learned to love myself. I've learned to practice self-compassion. It has been instrumental in my healing. The fact that I was able to complete my second master's degree after losing my son is because I learned to not have my identity intertwined be with myself, be Anitra's best friend, be with my clients and help them to, in turn, to heal and to have success in so many different ways, not because of just, running on the hamster wheel, but because they build a better relationship with themselves and they are learning to just to be. And that's the power of self-compassion.
Chad, I know you have to hop off. Thank you. First of all, Anitra, thank you so much for sharing, pouring out. Chad, I know you had a follow-up really quickly, and I see your hand, Captain.
Right. So I just want to follow up. Thank you, Anitra, for sharing that. That's an experience we hear from so many students, generations of students I've seen go through. I do have to jump off to address grading issues. We're doing final grading now, but I would also like to say that self-compassion is something that I've just seen minority students aren't willing to give themselves as much because the world is sending so much negativity their way, and what that leads to is isolation, not forming study groups, not having the same sort of willing to forgive themselves in order to ask for help and engage. It also leads that sort of that sense of trying to avoid shame leads to overcommitment. I have to do more. I continually have to do more and more and more. And that leads to, and nobody can really work well when you're overcommitted. I know from experience, and that's where we start to see issues, down the line in terms of academic progress and maybe even more worse outcomes. And so those are things I see from an academic perspective. Thank you so much, Tahira. I appreciate being a part of the panel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chad, for your time today. Catherine, I see your hand. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So Anitra, I needed to hear that today, right? End of semester stuff, and everything is an enormous forest fire right now. So I needed that 3-factor schema to work through with myself. So I needed that. My question is well, I don't think there's an answer, but one thing that I've been noticing both through my scholarship and graduate student stuff, and also with graduate students in engineering here on the ground, is that, we're instructed to send our students to the Counseling and Psychological Services office. And Penn State's doing a good job. We have this red folder for what to do if, and really clear step-by-step instructions. I think the university is aware that we're not that kind of doctor, most of us, right? And instructed for what to do and where to direct our students. But the problem is, and I know Penn State is not alone in this, is that the CAPS centers are overwhelmed, right? They are underfunded, they are overwhelmed. Our students have a 6-week lead time for getting to see somebody. And by and large, students in my own group that have, kind of reported back after going to CAPS, they, sometimes it's psychology students themselves who are working in these offices, and they don't really understand, PhD student level issues. And they can talk to undergrads really well, but maybe don't have an understanding of grad student stuff. So I guess my question is, it's several fold, right? Are there places that are doing this really well to actually care for the mental health of graduate students? And the second part of this is, what needs to change in the system, or what do we just need to rebuild from the ground up in order to best structure CAPS for graduate students specifically?
Thoughts from this is a great question, Catherine. I think we're all speechless.
I'm just at a loss. Even just to say, yes, this is happening on my campus too, would really be helpful.
I see Sunny has some thoughts, and Shawnee.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I'm just going to talk from the perspective of what we can do as individuals and maybe collectively. So I don't have a perspective on like campus interventions. Personally, I run a YouTube channel, okay? And so I speak very candidly about things that we can't talk about. And anytime my students are feeling down, I say, go look at my videos, and it's public to let them know that I'm not shying away from the issues. Collectively, I think we can hold town halls. You know, we can do things within our units and hold programming and open up safe spaces for us to gather, right? If the CAP or Health Services Center is overflowing.
Shalane.
Yeah, I agree with that, but also like a lot of institutions have student insurance, so you don't have to go through the student counseling services. So I didn't, because nobody has 6 weeks to wait. I got issues, okay? Like I need to talk to somebody like in the next week or so, you know? So going through insurance is a good option. Yes, it's like $16 and something a visit or $15 a visit. Some of them it's $0 a visit, depending on the insurance. So hopefully institutions have good student insurance available. I don't know. I have pretty good student insurance, but also I think I'm of the mindset of like tearing down the whole institution and changing how we do things. Is that possible? I think it gets really discouraging sometimes when you see how much bad behavior is upheld. And a lot of the institutional problem isn't the student counseling center, it's the bad behavior of faculty members that is upheld and substantiated and even rewarded, right? So we have people who have assaulted, mistreated students who get best researcher of the year and are these high positions. And I think we should tear those people down. Okay, that's just my personal opinion. And I don't know how we can do that, but you know, I think that it should be there should be some consequence for bad behavior, especially when you cause students to suffer in such a way. And it should not be expected in any way, form, or fashion. So I don't know exactly how we do that, but I always speak out against it whenever I see it.
So
Dr. Hunter, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I can make this related to what was just said, right? Which is that the student counseling centers aren't always, even if they can get you in, they aren't always a safe place if you're going through some kind of drama with a high profile professor, right? So I dropped a link to a map. There is a small revolution that happened in psychology, like over COVID time, which is psychologists can now get these interjurisdictional compact things for telehealth, right? So you can see a psychologist in any state that's ratified this thing. And I just looked it up, Pennsylvania has, so that's like 30 something states. And so that means that your students can go on things like Therapy for Black Girls is a very, very busy website, and find a therapist that's outside of where they necessarily live. Now, one of the things y'all might want to talk about next week, it sounds like, is having a fund, right, that can sort of support differences in the cost of going out of network, quote unquote. And even though a lot of insurance companies have compensated, they took down the rules completely for people enrolled in schools in terms of cross state line stuff. So I guess, Catherine, to answer the question, it would be encouraging people to think bigger than the counseling center.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much for this link. I have like all these links now. I like have all these windows open. This is fantastic.
Just think, if you go to Psychology Today and you search by video, like telehealth providers, and you want an interjurisdictional, I mean, there's a lot of folks that'll pop up, and then you can actually get specific about what kind of credentials and focus and experience you want to.
Yeah, love that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the audience before I kind of do closing comments from the panel? Okay, so I wanted to just wrap up by asking the panel, share one thing that you'd like to, if there's someone in the audience that's struggling right now, can you share one thing that could help them through their struggle. If someone's personally struggling, or provide some ways that they could do self-care or something along those lines. Encourage someone that's struggling. What would you share with them?
I can start first. So I guess when I was struggling, I talked to Professor Reed-Smith, and I just was open and honest and transparent with her. And I think that was very important. So there are people who can help you. They don't have to be your advisor necessarily, or people on your committee or your immediate circle. So definitely seek the help, because you will definitely feel better afterwards. And that's what I would say.
I'll be very tactical about it because, you know, if you're on the call and you're struggling, you might be an engineer and you might think of yourself as very analytical and sort of averse to like someone's couch. And I think that's good. There's actually, that's perfect for CBT. And I would recommend, like, feeling great is just sitting here, because I got on Amazon. It's like, you've ordered this book 30 times. I'm like, what? This is the new edition. It's one of those things that gives you an intro to the skills you'll build. And it's very tactical and gives you something that you can know if you're doing the things while you're on some wait list, right? While you're deciding who you can trust and have a conversation with. You can, wherever you are, it can be there tomorrow. I don't get any kickbacks. I don't know who wrote that book.
And it's called Feeling Great. Can you put it up?
Feeling Great. There's another one called The Worry Cure. It's good. These cognitive behavioral bibliotherapies. There's like empirically valid self-treatment.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to share?
I think I'll say something really quick. And it's something that I always tell all my students is that you have value innately. And I know we talked about identity and things like that before, and it's hard to change, but if it's me saying it, maybe reiterates it for you, that your value is not in your degree or your research project or your position. Your value is innately in you from just being who you are. And I always tell like my students, like, how do we know that? Like, okay, if somebody, harms you or harms some, you're going to get the same amount of time because you're still a person. A homeless person on the street, you would still get time for that, right? Because there's a consequence for harming a person with some value. So every person has value, and you are important, and you are valuable. So that's it. And also, don't be scared of therapy. It's these people are well trained, and if you don't like them, you can change it. Don't feel bad about like changing your therapist. If it's not a good vibe, it's not like a breakup. You're not married to them. It's not like a big process. Just like, don't book another appointment and book somebody else.
Thank you, Julie.
I wanted to ask, we always say your validation, and I say it is not in the PA, is not in the stuff you do and your work and stuff, it's just in who you are. How does that feel though? What does that feel like? It's something that we preach, and I think the difficulty with us accepting that is because I've never met someone who actually knows how it feels and they're able to describe it to me. I know that this is the final comment, but I had that question because I don't want anyone leaving feeling underwhelmed and saying, okay, yes, I am the valid thing. What does it feel like? Can anyone say?
I can speak a little bit to that. I think what's important is to have other things that you're doing that's not just the main job, right? I'm doing this panel. I felt like this was important to organize. I have so many little encouragement groups. I literally have a group called Queens with Goals Accountability Group. What are we doing? Trying to make sure we go work out every week. It's a little group on Instagram, and they bring me so much energy and joy, and we share stuff. And I'm like, man, I wish this was my main job. Don't tell my department head that. I still love being a professor. I'm still here, but I do other things outside that that energize me. And I think you have to tap into what is your gift. And so I figured out that one of my gifts is to just open my mouth and share and encourage people. I do it in the classroom. I try my best, I do it with these group of strangers I've never seen before, but we all were doing this workout program together, and we, so find something else that taps into other aspects of what brings you joy. And then so my purpose is not, just being, I have like 3 titles on my name now, but that's not my purpose only. It's just one of the things that I do. So hopefully that helps. I don't know if that helped answer the question. Kyle says he's a barista. I moonlight as a barista. Okay. Yeah, and you know what? I think we need to normalize being able to say that, hey, yeah, we've got PhDs and MDs and this. And guess what? I like to salsa dance on the weekends. There's some people like that, right? I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think we also have to normalize that engineers, professionals can do things besides what the job title is.
I have a follow-up question to that. So what if those other joys don't make us money? How do we still feel validated? And I'm asking this question because I know it must be in the back of somebody's mind. All right.
No, that's a great question. The only thing I will say to that is a legit good question, because there's always, hey, follow your passion, follow what you love. And it's like, you can't make money with that. The only thing I would say to that is try to identify a way, if those things are just that so important to you, more than what you do in your main day-to-day, find a way, invest time into knowing how to monetize that, get into entrepreneurship, which I know is not easy, but find ways to monetize the things that you really enjoy and love. If what you're doing, I enjoy my day job enough that I don't feel like I have to, and plus I'm older. I don't look my age. I'm a lot older than I look. Okay. So I've been on the planet long enough to have evolved from just being one identity and, hey, I'm an engineer that can solve all the problems, to engineering is what I do. It's not who I am. There's so many other aspects of who I am. So, but to the point, see how you can monetize those things that you really enjoy. Because I mean, there's many stories. I know someone right now, her art, I won't even tell how much I spent. I bought an expensive piece of artwork from an independent artist because I loved her work so much. And she's an artist. She does art, and it's just so beautiful. I was like, I want a piece of your work from my office. So anyhow, let me stop here. Okay, so we are at time. We're a little past time. So I just want to thank everyone for coming. First of all, thank you to the panel for opening up, sharing, for the vulnerability. You guys gave me permission to be vulnerable. I hope everyone learned something on this panel today. I hope you took away at least 1 or 2 things. Obviously, this cannot be talked about in one session. Part 2, we'll talk about another aspect of some of this next week if you have time for that. And this has been recorded, so you could go back and watch the playback. Thanks so much to all the great comments in the chat, and lots of great comments in the chat. And I will stop here. Thanks, Bree. I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you all.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Reed-Smith and our other panelists. I really appreciate you all coming today and sharing your own lived experiences and some awesome resources that plenty of people, no matter whether you're an engineer or not, can use. And so I really look forward to seeing everybody next week. Like Dr. Reed-Smith said, our next session is April 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And I put the link in the chat, so I hope that you'll be there. Have a good one.
And just a reminder, there will be an exit survey. So as soon as you close the Zoom, we would love to receive your feedback on this session. So thank you so much, everybody, for attending.